I'm sick of my boy being underrated. Foot Knight is no B tier class, he's no C tier class. Foot Knight sits comfortably in the A tier. You know that stat we take on every single melee weapon because it's so important to have? Well, Foot Knight gives that in an aura 20% block cost reduction.
But Michael, there's no reason to pick Foot Knight over the Mercenary or the Grail Knight.
Bullshit. You can't out-damage the Grail Knight, but if your team doesn't need the sustain from the Mercenary, Foot Knight is an absolute brick wall of a frontliner. With the shield weapon, he pushes around rats better than anyone else in the game. And you give this boy a mace and sword, he's gonna cut through a horde like you've never seen before. He has access to more attack speed than both the Mercenary and the Grail Knight. Oh, and you know that class that we all love that can dash around and revive you and save the game from ending? Now imagine having a class that can do that, but not only that, his dash resets the second you go down, and he's gonna push down all of the rats around you, so when he revives you, you can actually recover as opposed to being revived in the middle of a horde. Yeah, that's right, we're talking about the Foot Knight, and I'm angry because this guy deserves more respect than he currently gets. Alrighty, in case you missed the point of my rant, today we're talking about the Foot Knight, a class that I think is very undervalued, and we're going to be giving you a guide on how to build him properly and also how you should be playing him strategically. Foot Knight is one of the classes that I think people are not building right. And so we're going to talk about two different builds. One of them is a damage build, which he is actually very good at, and the second one is going to be a full tank, full stagger build. And for the damage, of course, the best option is going to be the mace and sword. As always, we take block cost reduction and we go for the crit chance to get swift slaying up faster. Having that extra 20% attack speed is really important when you're fighting a horde on this weapon. And somewhat similar to the dual hammers, your main horde clearing attack is going to be the heavy attacks. So the way I like to use the mace and sword is I spam lights until I get swift slaying. So if I'm lucky, I'll get a crit, there we go. And then we start doing the heavies. And you'll notice that the heavy attacks have high cleave, pretty good stagger, a lot of damage, and the linesman trait. And this number right here is kind of misleading because the heavy attacks actually hit twice. You'll see there's two numbers. So one of them does 27 and the other one does 19.25. And one thing you need to know too is that the push attack is an absolute monster on this weapon. It's really fast, it has high cleave, and it has high damage. So if I'm fighting a horde, my combo might look something like this. Starting out with a push attack, going with lights, maybe throw in more push attacks. Once I finally get a crit, then I start moving into heavies. If they get too dense, we do another push attack, and so on. If the horde is not dense, they're kind of trickling in, it's better to just do lights. You're going to be getting more value out of your attacks that way. For killing armored enemies, your lights are not going to do any damage unless you crit, of course. So really, you're sticking to the push attack and heavies. This is the one thing like the mace and sword is okay at. Thankfully, it's pretty easy to hit headshots with it. You definitely want to be trying to hit the head when you're trying to kill armored enemies. And usually on the Foot Knight, I like to take the repeater handgun. That's really just personal preference. You could also run the handgun. They're both good for killing specials. It's really just, I just really prefer the feel of the repeater handgun more. Make sure you're always running health and block cost reduction on your necklace. I would make sure you're running stamina recovery on your trinket, and I like to run crit chance too. So now to get into the talents for the damage build, the first important one that we have to take is crowd clearer. Now this is going to give you 15% attack speed for 3 seconds every time you push an enemy. If I remember right, that's the same amount that Willow Stance gives you on the Handmaiden. That's a really good talent, gives you access to a lot of attack speed, and you want to be using your push attack fairly frequently when you're running this damage build. Now, the thing with the level 15 talent is, especially with the mace and sword, we're not going to get much use out of bulwark. We're just not staggering enough enemies to make good use of it. And my opinion on mainstay has kind of changed. Like, yeah, mainstay is good for horde clear. And you could even argue that with this damage build, we are mainly a horde clearer. But the thing is, I don't think most parties actually need help clearing horde. They don't need help clearing trash. The important enemies are really the elites, like the armored enemies, the maulers, the berserkers, and of course the specials. But see, mainstay isn't going to really help us killing those. So for that reason, we take enhanced power, and that's really just because bulwark and mainstay isn't a good option for us. If we had access to smiter, that would be fantastic, but we don't. For the level 20 talent, now Rock of the Reichland is one of the best talents in the game. Like I said in the intro, block cost reduction is the stat we take on every single melee weapon in the game because it is so important to have. And if you take this, your teammates are going to have 80% block cost reduction. I'm not sure how the math on that works, but it's going to make the life of your teammates much easier. Comrade in Arms is also good in specific situations. If you just wanted to make an Ironbreaker an unkillable god, then you could take this. The 10% increased power is also noteworthy. For level 25 talent, we take its hero time because, like I said in the intro, this pretty much makes the Foot Knight a handmaiden. This gives Foot Knight the ability to do what the handmaiden does and maybe even a little bit better. Make sure he doesn't go invis, and if he's not taking battering ram, he's not going to knock everything down and he might not even be able to get to you. But still, I just think this is just way too valuable of a talent to not take. And for the damage build, we take Bull of Ostland. As you can see, this gives you 30% attack speed for 10 seconds. Add that with Crowd Clearer, you're at 45% attack speed. Tack on Swift Slaying and you're at 65% attack speed. The attack speed cap is a myth. There is no attack speed cap in this game. Although you do get diminishing returns, but that's beside the point. So you can start to see if you ult and then you start with the push attack, you light attack a few times and you get Swift Slaying going, you become an absolute murdering machine. And his ult is only on a 30-second cooldown. If you're fighting a horde, it's pretty much going to be back up by the time Bull of Ostland wears off. Not to mention it resetting from its hero time. So that's a damage build. It's great if your team just needs more damage overall and doesn't need like a solid brick wall frontline tank. So with that being said, now we're going to talk about the brick wall build. For the brick wall build, we take a shield weapon, and the thing about shield weapons you need to know is that stagger breakpoints come into play here. These breakpoints are what make the shield weapons actually good. There's two different breakpoints you can go for. One is being able to shield bash a Chaos Warrior out of its overhead, and to do that, you take Power versus Chaos on your shield weapon, and you do the same on your charm. For both of these breakpoints, you have to take Opportunist on your melee weapon. You'll also have to take Staggering Force on your level 10 talent, you'll have to take Enhanced Power for your level 15 talent, and you should be there. Now another breakpoint, and this is the breakpoint I like to run, you can go for being able to push Plague Monks out of their flurry. And to do that, to hit that breakpoint, you need to make sure you have Power versus Skaven on your weapon, and you have Power versus Skaven on your charm. And you actually don't have to take Staggering Force, so I opt to take Crowd Cleaver. Though, if you do decide to take Bulwark, then you're not going to be able to stagger them anymore. So, really, it's about you either take Enhanced Power and Crowd Cleaver, or you take Staggering Force and Bulwark. And just to make sure that works. Come on, do your flurry. You'll see there. One thing to note too, like for instance on the Mason's Shield, I don't have the red version, so I don't have the full 10% power versus Skaven. I do have to take Staggering Force in order to hit that breakpoint, but you don't have to take Enhanced Power. You can also run Bulwark. But also, if you take Enhanced Power and Crowd Cleaver, then you're not going to be hitting the breakpoint. And to talk about the weapon specifically, I have fallen in love with the Mason Shield. Now, the heavy on the Mason Shield is absolutely crazy. It has infinite stagger. You'll see here, I put down probably around 100 Skaven slaves, and it still was just 2 heavies to kill every single one of them. So that is going to do huge damage to a dense horde, but one thing you want to keep in mind is that you don't necessarily want to be spamming it unless the horde is running at you and the density is really high. The reason is, if you don't have a whole lot of enemies in front of you and you start shield bashing them, well, for one, you're going to have to chase those enemies around to kill them because they're not going to die from one hit, and you're going to have to chase them down to hit them again to actually kill them, and on top of that, they might go flying off to the side, at which point they might wrap around you and actually start hitting you from behind. So it's actually best to not spam the shield bash. I find it best to throw in a shield bash and then 2 lights and then a push and then another shield bash. And that's kind of the combo that I like to stick with on the Mace and Shield. It's actually kind of a funny weapon because if there's a lot of enemies in front of you, it's really easy to use and it feels really good. But as soon as the enemies are more spread out, it starts to feel really awkward because like the range on the Mace is really awkward and the hitbox is weird. And the best way I've found to combat that is just to spam the first light and then reset. Now this weapon really starts to shine when you're trying to kill armored enemies. Well, your combo is just a push attack and a light. And that combo is really going to push that armored enemy around. So then we're going to talk about the spear and shield. The first thing you'll notice is that this weapon does not have a shield bash. So your combo for clearing out trash is simply just do light 1 and 2 and then reset. So light, light, reset, light, light, reset, light, light. And one thing you should know is that the first light attack does have the tank attribute, which, you know, in theory that would mean it'd be better to spam the first light attack. I did a lot of testing on this and honestly it doesn't make much of a difference at all. So again, this weapon kind of shines at taking out elite armored enemies. And your combo for that is simply just a push attack and a heavy. Push attack. I don't like doing this, but if you're comfortable with it, you could also add another heavy at the end of the combo. So push attack, light, heavy. And that's kind of slow to me. I like the snappiness of the push attack and the heavy. It's also really easy to hit headshots with it. If you're in a really, really bad situation too, you can also use the weapon special, which is going to keep your block up while you attack, but you should notice that it doesn't do a whole lot of damage. It's really just if you're in a really, really bad situation, you need to squeeze out a little bit of damage. And you definitely want to try to hit the headshots, because if you don't, it's going to take forever to kill whatever you're hitting. And also, since the spear and shield doesn't have a shield bash, you can't hit that first breakpoint I talked about where you shield bash a Chaos Warrior out of its overhead. Since you don't have a shield bash, you're not going to be getting enough value out of Bulwark to actually use it, so we take Enhanced Power, for one, to help us hit that breakpoint, and 2, there's really no other good option. And also for this tank brick wall build, we always take Battering Ram. I understand the urge to take Bull of Ostlin because it feels really good to attack fast, but if your job is to push around enemies, then Battering Ram is incredibly good at that. If you don't know, it makes it so you can use your ult through any enemy in the game, even bosses. So even if they were like 50 Chaos Warriors lined up in a line in front of you, you can knock down every single one of them. And just to address Numb to Pain, this sounds like it's really good, but the thing is, it's really not, because if you're knocking down the enemies in front of you, then that invulnerability is just going to be wasted, because by the time the enemies get up, your invulnerability is already going to be run out. Also, these two are just too good to pass on. So just to back it up and recap it for the talents and the breakpoints, to be able to push a Plague Monk out of its flurry, you need to have Power vs. Skaven on your melee weapon, Power vs. Skaven on your charm, and Enhanced Power. Now, that's if you have the red weapons. If you're like me and you have only the orange version of the Mace and Shield, then you have to take Staggering Force, which would also allow you to take Bulwark. But you cannot take Enhanced Bulwark and Crowd Clearer. You have to take Staggering Force if you don't have the red weapon to hit the breakpoint. So for the Mace, for my orange version of the Mace and Shield, this is what my talent build would look like, and with my Spear and Shield, which I have the red version, this is what my talent build would look like. Okay, yeah, that does it for the builds. So now we're gonna switch over to some gameplay and talk strategy. So as a Foot Knight, you are the definition of a tank in Vermintide. And the word tank doesn't necessarily mean the same thing that it does in other RPGs. You're not there to soak damage in Vermintide. You should not be soaking damage if at all possible, but you should be protecting your teammates. Being a tank in Vermintide is all about protecting. So that means that if there's a horde, you are in the horde's face, staggering everything you possibly can, so that your teammates aren't taking damage from them, and that the enemies are taking extra damage because they're staggered. If there are a bunch of specials roaming around, then you protect the special snipers so they don't get hit in the back. If there's a boss, then you protect the boss killer so they can actually kill the boss. And to see this in action, you'll see here that we are on Convocation of Decay on the finale, where things get kind of crazy. We've got one teammate that's dead and is about to resurrect, and I've got aggro of all of these elites. So it's best for me to actually drag all of these elites away from where he's going to spawn. You'll see the bounty hunter is about to go pick him up. And this clip really shows the stagger power of the Foot Knight. Like, several Chaos Warriors, several Storm Vermin, several Maulers, and it's really, we can really just push them around. Like, I even got stuck there, got my ult back up, and, well, it's just not a problem. As a Foot Knight, you make all of these enemies that are big, scary bad guys, you basically just shove them around so they're useless. Now for boss fights, your job is to protect the boss killer. And also, don't forget you can ult while you're reviving. Just make sure you hold down the revive button. And that's a very, very useful tool on the Foot Knight. Anyway, you'll see here that we're actually not trying to fight the boss right now. We're actually going to kill all of these specials and elites that could possibly aggro onto our team while they're killing the boss. Because we're not necessarily going to do a ton of damage to the boss. So it's better for us just to make the boss killer's jobs easier by both staggering the boss and killing anything that could potentially harm the boss killers. So here we just heard that a horde triggered, so it's actually best for us to help finish off the boss here, and then we're going to be heading straight for that horde. And we get right in there, in the front, using our shield bash, using our push, using our attacks, everything we can possibly do to stagger everything in front of us. And now, especially if you're using a shield weapon, I think it's kind of your duty to revive teammates that are down because you have so much stamina. You can take so many hits before canceling your revive. And also see here, you'll see the battle wizard went down after she ulted into the horde. Don't ever do that. And we're able to get in there and revive her too. And with the ult revive tech, this situation, even though 2 people went down, it's just not even a big deal. Even though hell is being rained down upon us by this Gatling gunner, you notice that I'm not trying to snipe the gunner because I'm actually trying to control all of the trash so that Barden can snipe the gunner. And yeah, never forget that your ult is incredible for pushing bosses off ledges. And one thing you need to keep in mind is that you have incredible synergy with any damage that is static on the ground, namely fire. So here we're on Twitch mode and there's like a ton of berserkers and we use our ults and we, you know, hold our ground, and because of that, the Barden got 16 kills with just a flame bomb. So yeah, Foot Knight has incredible synergy too with the Battle Wizard taking the Coruscation Staff, because we can just sit there and push the enemies back into the fire over and over and over again. And so the next couple clips are going to showcase just how great the Foot Knight is in kind of panic situations. So here we've got a pretty crazy group of enemies, a lot of elites in there. And I actually could have revived the bot here and did the ult tech, but oh well, who cares, it's a bot. And so here, like, we're in a situation where it has to be, I have to protect the dwarf from this giant horde of elites. And we're actually able to do so with the Mace and shield. We just push them around and then Barden is free to blast them away with the Masterwork pistol. Taking Opportunist and having the ability to stagger all those enemies is really, really important on the Mace and shield. And I don't know about you, but facing a group of Plague Monks like this can sometimes be pretty scary on Cataclysm, but since we hit our breakpoint and we're able to push all of these monks out of their attack animations, they are just easy free kills for the Slayer and the Warrior Priest. And of course we have to show at least one clip of the Mace and Sword, the kind of high attack speed, high damage build. And you'll see how great it is at clearing hordes. Main thing you need to know is that if the enemy is not dense, you should be using light attacks, otherwise it's going to get kind of awkward. But as soon as it's dense, you start throwing out those push attacks and those heavies. You're going to cut through hordes like they're butter. Now the reason the Foot Knight is so undervalued is because your stats are not going to look good on him. You're not going to do a lot of damage. You're probably going to be the lowest in the lobby. And you're probably going to take a fair amount of damage if you're really in there protecting your team. And for that reason, people think he's not doing much, and well, that couldn't be further from the truth. If you're in there staggering everything and making everything easy kills for your teammates, your team is going to complete the mission so easily, and they're all going to pat themselves on the back and be like, wow, we did a good job, when unbeknownst to them, it was so easy because you were in there pushing all of the enemies around so they had free kills. And I know a lot of you are going to be thinking, well, in that situation, wouldn't it be just better to have more damage on the team? And you would be right in some situations. But I think it's better to actually just have one person that is there and dedicated to just pushing enemies around, while the rest of the team covers all of your damage bases. And that's pretty easily feasible, by the way. Like if you had a Witch Hunter Captain, a Shade, and a Ranger Veteran also on your team, all of your damage needs are covered. And I would argue that it's actually better to invest more in crowd control at that point, with namely the Foot Knight. So yeah, as the Foot Knight, you are not the star of the show. You're not the DPS. The spotlight is not on you, but a lot of the times you'll be carrying these lobbies and nobody will even know it. So yeah, that is the Foot Knight, one of my favorite classes in the game. I appreciate you all spending your time watching, listening to me talk about Vermintide. Thanks guys for watching. If you like the video, please subscribe, like the video, and I will see you on the next one.